Thank you. There you go. I need Tim's gavel. Welcome to the Finance Committee, Selectmen, and School Committee joint meeting to review where we are on the 18 budget. The Finance Committee agenda for tonight basically is this review with the two boards and then possibly finishing up with minutes, but we have a very light committee tonight, so we'll probably dispense with that. So with no further ado, I guess maybe if Bonnie or Melissa could give us an update on the Selectmen's meeting that just finished 3 minutes ago, in terms of the priorities that they were talking about for headcount and capital, and then we'll move on to Mike for the schools, and then let's have an open forum for cross-board communication here. Melissa?
Sure, I'd be happy to, and Bonnie, you can add some flavor in, the rest of the selectmen as well. So we had a couple of different discussions. One, we spent a bit of time on staffing increases. There's a number of different positions being asked for from a number of different departments. And so we did take a kind of poll across the selectmen, what were the top priorities? We didn't go into discussion about all of them, but we wanted to at least identify what bubbled to the top. There were clear two priorities that did bubble to the top, and then I'll talk about the gray area in the middle. So top two were the two positions for Elder Human Services. That's one outreach coordinator and one 19.5-hour driver. Board felt very passionate about supporting our Elder Human Service Department. It's in our goals. And again, just want to make sure that they have the support they need, population increasing, aging, etc. That was clear. Second one was for highway, for one laborer for parks. Again, two things. Number one, seeing as, and I forget, was it Boston College? I forgot the name of the school, but there was...
UMass Boston.
Thank you. The study done over a year or two ago about what was needed in that department, and we're down, so we want to catch up. Obviously, fields are a priority for us as well.
And so I think that study actually said that recommended 2, and we're adding 1, so I mean, we're moving towards it.
Great point.
Okay, great.
Yep.
We did add a new director, if I may, that new director position too, so there's actually two additional FTEs there, so.
Right, but the study recommended the 2 4+ specifically.
Okay.
So, but we're moving towards that goal. Great.
So those were really clear, again, bubble to the top. What was in the gray area? Number one, support for both fire and police in general, making sure, and I think at the end of the Board of Selectmen meeting, like you said just 5 minutes ago, Selectman Carr really said it well, you know, the services, the ALS services will be moving further away from us. We want to make sure that our citizens get the right level of care when they need help. So that was a priority, although it didn't bubble to the top just yet. So like I said, we identified our top 2, but these are the discussion gray area. Police, as well, the chief was updating us in terms of replacing a position there, and that's 1 police and 1 dispatch for the 19th officer for police. Could come in at around, you know, level budget because some more senior folks are rolling off and we could bring on a more junior folks. And then in the gray area, and we did have questions for the school committee, was some of the school positions requested. I should add, we did mention the ELL teacher, which we understand is a legal requirement, so with that is, you know, that felt like a must to us. That's a different part of the conversation, but I'm just throwing that out there. We did discuss that. But for schools, and here's where we were trying to decide, fire, police, schools, we're all kind of in the middle. We had a question about, and guys just chime in if I get this wrong, but there's 3 positions that are open that aren't currently filled and don't intend to be filled until I forget the exact date.
Open is accurate, not intended to be filled is inaccurate.
Okay, help us understand these
There
positions.
is a preschool teacher who resigned their position in the fall, and we've been working to hire since then, and that's going to be hired pretty soon during this current school year. There was a math intervention specialist at the middle school that opened in the summer. We couldn't find a qualified hire prior to September. So, and we had another requirement for a Title IV specialist at Russell Street. So what we did in the interim was, because we didn't feel we could make a qualified hire on the math intervention specialist, we took that salary line item, put it towards the Title IV specialist at Russell Street. That allowed us to avoid an out-of-district placement that we might otherwise have incurred. But going forward, we do need that math intervention specialist at Russell Street and Shaker Lane. That's a position that moves between two buildings. So we do want to get that filled again. And then the third position was the librarian at the middle school. Again, it vacated in the summer. We've been trying to fill it. We really haven't found someone that we felt was meeting our requirements. In the interim, what we did was put a teaching assistant in that position so that it was at least staffed. And we feel for the time being that we can let that roll out to the end of the year. And then we'll reevaluate, how we want to staff that position and what the cost would be. It certainly would be staffed, and there will be a cost. We're just not 100% sure yet if it would be the full cost of what we've had in there before as a full-time librarian, or something less than that, some proportion less than that.
So the school committee has decided that, say, for example, the librarian is more important than the ELL teacher?
Well, I mean, we haven't broken it down in that type of granularity, because what we've done up till now is looked at thinking about priorities that are beyond what we would consider level serviced. And having those existing positions have been in the budget, they're still in the budget, we would consider them part of the level servicing. The ELL is a new requirement in the sense that it would add to the head count, but it's something that we have to do because we have students that require those services, and we're required to provide them. So, in terms of priority, I'll have something to say about that in a few minutes. But again, we haven't broken it down and looking at it position by position. The fact that something's open at the moment doesn't necessarily mean that it gets on our list of priorities beyond the fact that it's part of the level service budget.
That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so I'll take that under account. So that was our staffing, unless there's any other comments or questions. That was the staffing discussion. We did talk about as well, actually, we agreed with the capital list of priorities that Bonnie was so kind to work with all the different department heads to get all their different priorities in ranked order. And
excuse me, Melissa, on the ALS, there's a sheet given out for the SAFER grant that the selectmen supported the chief on going forward with. Are you going to follow up in the next 3 weeks or so with the chief on, if we don't get the SAFER grant, what does the cost of this service look like, and do we want to bring it forward or not? I mean, if it's break even, it's sort of one decision. If it's not break even, it's a different decision. What did you?
So I guess, Fred,
Question?
during our deliberations about that specifically, I think the board asked, let's not even consider the SAFER grant. So let's take a look at, if we don't, that's just a bonus if it happens.
Right.
And I think based on the chief's explanation and Bonnie's analysis, we should, this goes, as it moves forward, there is funding in place for the first 9 months, and then we'll have to really take a hard look at that second quarter, fiscal year 19.
Right.
So, but I think you have an absolute valid point. To tie numbers into what I just said would be fantastic too. And I'm sure it's one of these PowerPoints that the chief has done.
So.
Well, the most recent handout we had tonight
Yes.
has it there, yes.
Okay,
Well, that's on the safest grant, that's on the SAFER grant, that's taken into consideration.
That's
Oh, it's both.
both sets of numbers.
Okay.
Okay, so are you, Chief, are you comfortable that these are the numbers, or are you still working them, or?
Those are the numbers that included the grant. On the other presentation that was in the packets, that did not include the grant.
Okay. And.
So we are going forward with the funding of the program, assuming that we don't get the grant. And to neutralize the impact to the operating budget, what we need to do is increase the transfer from the ambulance receipts. And we think that there's enough of a balance, an accumulated balance in that ambulance receipt account from the last few years, that we can get ourselves through that 9-month gap where we're not bringing in the ALS revenue, but we have all the ALS personnel expenses.
Okay, so for our next meeting.
Yes, we'll
also
have.
ought to have a spreadsheet that both the selectmen and we can look at.
Yes.
As to whether we want to try to support this program this year or next year or whatever.
Correct. That'd be the full cost to include all fringe benefits.
Everything. Yes.
Just for clarification, if I may, we voted to approve the chief going forward with the grant.
For the grant, right. But
We
that
didn't
doesn't-
say, absolutely, let's go all on and let's do this.
Right, but the program hasn't been voted on yet.
Correct.
And that, we haven't voted on it
They need
either,
a
but I
further
just want to
vote
make sure we're all
to
on the same
include it in
page.
the fiscal 2018 budget, which has not happened yet.
But we will bring that fiscal analysis to the next meeting.
Okay, great. Good. All right.
Okay, from a capital perspective, a couple different things. There are, we have, let's see, 3.7+ million in requests. We've got about 2.7 million available. So we've got about $1 million in terms of deficit and requests. But again, two things. Bonnie was so kind as to work with our department heads to get their ranked priorities and kind of draw a cut line to get the top priorities in within the budget that we have. So we did vote to adopt that. The other part of this is the use of CPC funds. So there are 2 items that potentially could be funded through CPC. 300 King Street, $30,000 for street landscaping and seating improvements, and improving the Long Lake bathhouse for $300,000. So those need to be reviewed by the CPC committee and, give us their thoughts on if these really qualify and any thoughts from their side, but that's a potential there for that type of
Right,
funding.
and just as a bit of an aside, any word on the Williams land? I mean, that was going to really sap CPC for a while if it came through, and then it didn't, so.
Well, there is funding in there too, that was specifically through some host community agreements that was specifically for active recreation, so you're right, that is coming, but there is funding in there specifically for active recreation.
Yeah, a couple hundred.
Yeah.
But we still have to
Somewhere.
find the other, so, okay, may have to get creative.
About 130,000 there.
Yeah.
You had a question about the Joyce Williams property, that on the selectmen's agenda for this coming Monday night is a revised purchase and sales agreement, which would allow us to pursue, again, the purchase of the property. The original P&S was conditional upon being awarded a $400,000 grant, so it was, the total purchase price was over $1.2 million. We only had to come up with a little over $800,000 in CPC funding. This time, we'd have to come up with the total amount on CPC funding. Bonnie is preparing an updated analysis for the selectmen, for yourselves, and the Community Preservation Committee on what the available funds are. I think it's safe to say that, at least for the open space money, if we need to have to apply another $400,000, presumably in borrowing, to meet that will sort of be tapped out of what we can do for open space purchases.
Certainly open space.
And has been discussed about mitigation funds. In the special town meeting, we can have an article again this year for the blended CPA, adding funds to increase the base for state match.
Right.
And we've got significant monies that have accumulated. We have an upper limit of about $500,000 that we can put into the fund to get the matching funds. We have $300,000 fully from the Potpourri Group mitigation fund. We have another $300,000 that is accumulated from the 15 Great Road. So we're already way over the number of $500,000, but that gives an additional funding source for CPA eligible projects.
Right.
So.
What's your take on the temperature in the State House on the Eldridge bill for CPA? Me too. Ask our mole here. What's your sense?
It's going to be tough. A lot of legislators have signed on. to co-sponsor the bill. Both of our legislators have, Senator Eldridge and Representative Rosero. With the adoption of the CPA in the city of Boston, as well as others, that there are now a majority of the senators and representatives that have CPA communities. So maybe the climate is right for having a more sustainable source of revenues, but if not, then we're going to see significantly less in matching funds in the future. We got nearly 39% 2 years ago. Last year was 27%, and
With the big cities coming on, it's going to go down.
Well, the state budget just got hit by $18 million too, so, you know, that's.
For half of this.
What?
Somebody's got to pay for your revenue.
That didn't trickle down.
Yeah, I wish.
So just two more things, and then I'm done with our summary, and that is lastly, capital stabilization. So we did put over 400,000 in there. And then we had just a philosophical debate at this point about leveraging some of the 2.5% that we collect, not just to pay for things, but to reduce the actual debt. And Selectman Carr's brought that up a few times, and it's an idea that we definitely want to look into. So Bonnie's going to help us with some numbers. What would it look like if we did that with a portion of the funds? And so we'll take a look at that.
Great.
Thank you.
And the rest of the capital basically is okay, or anything you?
There was, I think, one or two items we had a question on,
The
yeah.
cemetery commission, the cemetery request is being reviewed right now by our new DPW director, so there are some changes anticipated with that. I will have them in the next
That's
meeting.
just updates as we go on. Okay, great. Okay, anything else from your side right at this point? No?
I think that's it.
Shift over to schools. Mike, if you give us a brief walkthrough.
Yep. In terms of priorities, we'll speak to them. We haven't met as an open committee since that request was made. We're meeting Thursday. So we expect to have a robust discussion on the budget overall, mostly based on what transpires here. But in working with the budget subcommittee and talking to the school department admin team, our first priority obviously is to stay level serviced. And the number that is in the model right now for level service is $807,000. That includes our salary increases to retain our current staffing level, projected increases in sped case and out-of-district tuition and case transportation, some increases in operational costs, supplies and materials at the schools, and the staffing position for the ELL teacher. Our next level of priority would be to address growing class sizes at Russell Street and the shared special teachers between Shaker Lane and Russell Street, the gym teacher, music teacher, art teacher. We have one of each. They move between two buildings. Both those buildings' class size are getting a little big, and having just one devoted resource in each of those subjects between two buildings is starting to become problematic. So what we would be looking for in terms of the next level of priorities is adding a classroom teacher at Russell Street and one staff position that would cover a couple of those specials and augment the staffing that we already have in place for that. And then we would also want to put a Title I math instructor for $16,000, again, that would move between Shaker Lane and Russell Street. So that's like another $126,000 in priorities. The next thing that was on the list of things that we presented at the January Saturday meeting would be the assistant principal position at the middle school. That had been a half-time position in the past. We eliminated it when we went through kind of a budget crunch and had to reduce some staffing several years ago. We feel that the next level of priority would be to bring that back at full-time, which is about $95,000. And then the last item on the list that we presented in January, and it's on would be kind of at the bottom of the priority list of all the things we had submitted, would be starting towards our drive for tuition-free full-day kindergarten. In the first year, we would be looking to fund that with a $120,000 increase in our budget, which would allow us to reduce the amount of tuition that we charge. The goal would be to do another $120,000 year 2 and a third $120,000 year 3, and at that point we would have a tuition-free full-day kindergarten program. So that's where our priorities are in terms of the operating budget. We'll have a more robust discussion about that with the full committee on Thursday. The capital list that we submitted in January is prioritized. That's already done. So we're just waiting to see where we all think that fits in with all the other capital requests across the town. In terms of where we want to be, that would be our list.
And on their capital, you put.
Put in priority order, so the items that are funded in.
You took the
Yes.
top 2 or 3 or 4
Right down.
items. Okay. So at least the list that we have that we're looking at should be consistent with the priorities that you put in for capital.
Right.
And
You know,
it was 300.
317, I think?
317 were the capital item.
317.5.
Solid.
Go ahead, Joe. Do you have a comment on?
No, I just
Okay.
So, so at least we're consistent in terms of the priority, where the cutoff is, I don't know.
It goes down to the Shaker Lane phone system.
Okay.
That drops off.
We'll take a look at that, and again, we'll have a discussion about that in our full meeting, but.
But that's the number at this point that the selection of looked at, and Bonnie has sort of cut off to fit
Yeah,
within.
and we
the
would like, when we see that, just take one more look and just make sure that, talk to administration to make sure we're good to go on that. so.
That's fine, but I think that, just so we're consistent on what your priorities are versus that. And just a couple of questions I had, this is the department budget analysis that you passed out at our meeting. The sped case and OD tuition of 71 grand. Do we actually have identified cases at this point, or is this in anticipation of some more people moving into town, or what is that?
I would say that right now, it's based on the information we have and what our current caseload is, and,
That's correct.
yeah, there's not an explicit amount in there that's in anticipation of, like, kids we don't see in the pipeline.
Okay.
Now, that could happen, and that could change, but there's nothing in there that's reserved for that particular purpose.
And the 30,000 on water.
Yeah, that came, we have a memo from the water department
Yeah.
that has that on there. We certainly can talk to them and ask them again if they think that's wholly accurate based on their analysis, but that's from them, that's why we put that particular number in there.
Okay. Yeah, I looked at that memo, and it looked like the $30,000 number, and it's somewhere between 27 and 35, depending on which number you pick. So 30,000 is a good number. But that was the total dollar value to put an inch of water on all the fields, which was the recommended Cornell. So you've been watering the fields to some degree. So I wouldn't think that you'd need the whole 30,000, I don't know. And, I know that
Yeah.
doesn't sound like a lot
Right.
versus your budget, but if there was another 10,000 that we could go to COA.
So
veterans or somebody, that's
we
a
saw
big
that
deal.
issue raised in Bonnie's memo, and we'll definitely have Steve go back and talk to Water, and we'll have him give us an idea of exactly, right, what is that going to get us? Is it gonna get us as much, somewhat more than we have been using prior? And if we need to adjust it, then we'll make the adjustment. We'll make that
I mean, we
determination.
should do what we should do to take care of the fields, but I'm just,
Right.
if you're already spending 15 and the total is 30 and you
Right,
get
then it's a
another
net
30,
of-
are we gonna put $45,000
Right.
worth of water on the fields? If that's what they need,
Well,
that's what we need. but-
We'll revalidate that
Okay.
in the near term.
Okay. Anything else from these questions? So you have sort of your marching orders from the selectmen on the selectmen side. I think Chuck recommended that you put the 807, was it 807, whatever
Correct,
the number
that's
was.
factored into
in
your
there.
current.
So where are we now in terms of the balanced budget or not so balanced budget?
With the 807 in here, we have a deficit in the level staffing budget of 426,000. I do have in my memo, there's a caveat that we're now currently going through the process of looking at plan design changes. We did some with the retirees. You might remember we had a selectmen's meeting that authorized some changes that allowed the increase, instead of being 12%, to be closer to just under 6%. We're doing that now currently for the employee groups also, but there is a process, and until that is final, I need to kind of hold the 12% increase that we're currently projecting. If we go through that process and we're successful, then there might be another $200,000 that I can save out of the health insurance budget, $200 to $250, depending on what the design changes are, which would reduce the deficit from the 426 to, somewhere closer to 200.
Okay, but your number does not have the health and elder services,
Not yet,
and it
no.
does not have the highway in there, so
No.
that's another 100 and something over the other way. So
Correct.
we're in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, so we have to figure out what we're going to do, assuming we try to fund the 807.
Correct. The other thing that I asked the assessors to go through is just to do another check on new growth. We have about 700,000 estimated for the next fiscal year based on what's in the pipeline. Some things have changed a little bit. We had the movie theater coming on by June 30th. That might be a little later, but we've got some housing developments that are coming on a little sooner. They're selling pretty quickly. So it might be a wash, it might be a change. So we're going through that process now with Roland to kind of figure out, do we need to revise that number? And again, the other benefits, once we get the enrollment figures for when we go through open enrollment, we'll really be able to lock down that health insurance budget a little bit more, but.
Can you just respond to that a little bit? Fred, I just wanted, you're making me a little uncomfortable when you just say if we assume that we're going to fund the 807. Because you're not talking that we're going to assume that we're going to fund the other departments at their level servicing budget number. So, we have this in here as our level service, so if we don't think as a town that we can meet the level service number, I don't want it assumed that the 807 is the first thing that's going to get whacked at. That should not be the assumption. The assumption should be that we're going to work together to figure out where the best balance can be struck to meet all of the requirements for the town.
True, but we're also awaiting the assessment that you said you were working on your reserve fund. So, as they build up, how much you're planning on using in reserves or revolving
That will
funds,
certainly be
whatever,
part of the
we
discussion, and we're
need
happy to have that.
We need to understand what that is.
Right.
So that we can, I think, make a balanced recommendation to the town on how we balance Article 4 and the rest of the budget.
Now, the thing to keep in mind about that is, we've already factored in what we expect our circuit breaker number to be, and that amount has already been pulled off of what the numbers that you see here. In terms of school choice, we have some built in that we expect to spend. We certainly can talk about if it's enough, or do we need to rely on more, and we expect that to be a part of the discussion. The other revolving accounts, again, like, the amount we take in for cafeteria sales have already been, what we project to get, pulled out. So, there is room to maneuver in there, but we just got to go through the process.
So when you and I discussed it, we agreed that you would complete that analysis,
Yep.
and then we could review it.
Yeah, so we will also on Thursday have a discussion of where we think our projected balances are.
Yep.
And then once we get that signed off, we'll push that forward, so everybody will have that at the beginning of next week. And, can use that as part of the analysis to see how we can best get to where we need to be.
One second. Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Or? Selectmen for schools for selectmen. Take your best shot.
I think
Jim?
it's a first go around. I think, these meetings are always productive, and it's great to have conversation, and I think based on our discussions tonight, we should do it again within the very near future, and hopefully we can,
Well, we need to go to press in early March, right?
Right.
So maybe third week or
Okay,
what week in
Yeah, the warrant closes the 17th of March. The booklet with the recommendations goes out first week of April.
But we should get
But we
together a
should,
couple of
we
weeks
should be
before that.
reaching closure on the
Fine,
budget.
then we should- So let's look at maybe, I know we're scheduled for a meeting on the 21st of February, but I think that's actually school vacation week, so that may not be a good week to try to get everybody together.
Do you wanna-
I'm here.
We want to do it jointly on the 27th of February, the selectmen's regular meeting, right?
It's for us.
We can do
Does that
that.
work?
Yeah.
We can do that.
It's fine.
You okay with that, Mike, to try to get whoever you can?
Yep.
And
Shouldn't be
we'll
a
try to
problem.
have the subcommittees work together between now and then to clarify some of these points.
Perfect.
And see if we can't come to resolution by then, if not, get closer to where we think we need to be. And just a note to the public, go out and buy new houses, we need the new growth.
Yeah, plenty of them.
Yeah, before June 30.
Right, so I'll buy a few beers at the
Second,
restaurants.
all in favor, say aye.
I think my vice chair does have one comment.
Yeah, it's not directly budget related, but, you know, I just want to, I just note the school-related state aid and our net charges, and, you know, we have a net reduction in state aid to the schools here, while we still having, I think we added 20 students this year, and we see a reduction in our state aid. I think that warrants, if we have our state representatives visit us, to
Absolutely.
put that right in front of them, because, you know, we're experiencing growth in our students' population, and we're seeing, you know, no real increase in state aid, which is really what the whole purpose of the Chapter 70 money is for, is not to have it all shifted back onto the taxpayer, the real estate tax, but that's exactly what's going to happen here.
I know with the tech, we're basically a year in arrears with the charges. Is there any, is the same with the Chapter 70, or is the Chapter 70 supposed to be a current year?
It's a year behind.
I'm sorry, it's
It's
a
a
year
year
behind.
behind.
So if we saw.
Previous year, we saw 30 students increase.
So, okay, so, but that's an excellent point. With 30 more kids, we see less aid than what's going on. And it may be the way of the times. I mean, are we the only city or town that's seeing that, or is that across the board? Is that information available? 'Cause it's public information. Right?
Fair sheet.
So that, okay. That's a good point. Okay. It's only my.
Now, I want to just
No,
bring it up because, you know, you know, the reality of it is it shifts right back onto the real estate tax base. There's the only place it can be picked up from.
No, absolutely. But does the school committee reach out to our legislatures?
We have in the
I know,
past,
you know,
yeah.
the selectmen do it through Keith oftentimes. Do you guys?
We do as a
reach-
school committee and also as part of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. They know funding is important to us.
So is this, it's a Littleton issue, but is it only a Littleton issue, or is it a state?
It's
so
not
it's a
uncommon.
statewide outlook,
And the
statewide issue?
state, and the state charges are not necessarily attached to the enrollment changes. So they can be separate, but we see the, you know, they give us the allocation and then they take off, they give us the aid and then they take off whatever the charges are. So even though they might not be directly related in the cause, the bottom line is the same.
It's certainly worth looking into. I don't know if anything can be done about it, but. Good point.
The charter school formula is a big impact to it also. That seems to be climbing, you know, every year. And the reimbursement rate on charter tuition, you know, it goes down every year, but so the charges go up
Last year was about
exponentially.
half. It was about half. Last year, the reimbursement over the full 5 years was about half of what it's supposed to be by state law.
But school-related state charges, for example, what is in that? What are they giving us that's charging us
It's
for?
the charter school out tuition and the school choice out primarily, or any special ed strap payments. which can vary year to year, but it's primarily charter out and school choice out.
So do we?
So it's really no state aid.
Well, what they do is that here's your chapter 78, and we're taking this, and we're taking that.
Right.
Well, do we track the number of kids that choice out and charter out?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
We have a conversation.
Is that
about
increasing at a disproportionate rate?
No.
Versus the number of kids that are coming in? Or-
No.
Choice out is decreasing.
I'm sorry?
Choice out
Yes?
is decreasing.
Okay, and charter is?
Well, I'm including that in
Oh, okay,
charter.
so
and
charter,
choice.
so it's all that, okay.
Charter is truly flat, and
Okay.
what we would more clearly define as choice out is definitely has been a decline over, the one I looked at most recently, I think was 6 years.
And it has always been, at least in that short history, a net net students coming in rather than going out. But we do have a conversation about it every year, and it's not a rubber stamp. I think we have a thorough conversation about it every year and decide what we want to do.
So if the charges are increasing, then the state has upped the amount per pupil for charter at a faster rate than they're supporting public schools, is what my allocated old mind
I would say
sort of
that that's a
figures
fair
out.
interpretation. I don't know if that's supported by everybody else, but.
I think
Well, if the number of kids is flat to down and the charge is going up,
I think you have to be careful with that assumption. Charter school funding receives less than half of what per pupil funding is to fund a regular education student in the state.
Sorry, school choice.
Or school choice. So we receive a little over $5,000 for a student that choices into our district.
okay?
Average cost to educate a student in the state of Massachusetts is over $14,000.
Well, but on the other hand, if you have an empty seat and you get 5,000 for it, that's 5,000 in your pocket that you can have. So
Right.
Which is
it's a circular
something-
discussion that you,
We
that,
basically try
talk
to,
about it.
right, it helps us cut into the fixed cost problem.
right,
It helps us defray that over more students.
absolutely.
And over the long run, as we do see more developments in town, it is a part of the conversation we have about school choice every year is it makes financial sense, we believe it makes financial sense to do it each year that we've done it. But as we see more students coming in from Littleton, that means fewer seats to offer for school
Right.
choice, which means that our school choice and the overall revolving funds will go down over time. So that buffer that we've built up and relied on more heavily than I think we've used to over the last couple of years is also being hit just from the enrollment increases within town. So it's just something to keep you aware of.
It'll be an ongoing discussion and analysis.
Well, with our new education director who loves charter schools,
No comment.
buckle up.
Federal level, yes.
Careful. Okay. Any other points? That's a good point, though. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming out on a snowy night. Appreciate it. And we'll plan on getting together in a joint meeting the 27th with the selectmen sitting up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Musical chairs.
Thanks for coming out today. Do you have any minutes, Marilyn?
I can't vote on those minutes, so you don't have a quorum. I wasn't at
You
that
weren't
last
here, so
meeting, so you can't vote.
We don't have a quorum, so we can't vote. Coming back again.
Literally, people's like, did that.
Motion to adjourn? Unless it's something else.
No, the only roundtable, but I don't think anything other than your parade. Alan, anything to bring up as a roundtable?
No.
Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
How you doing, Al? I'll let you stay the other way.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, second.
All those in favor is aye.
Aye.
You just surprised me, that's all.
Okay, flip the switch.
Friend, former colleague.